Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Podcow. Thanks for listening today. My name's Andrew Campbell, and very happy to be joined by my colleague Sarah Sash in BC once again. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. It's been a while. It feels like a long time.
It feels like a long time. We had lots of time to connect at the annual policy conference in Ottawa, but a lot has happened around the world since then. But more importantly, the snow's all gone from Ontario, and it's almost spring.
I thought you guys just had a giant ice storm.
We're not going to talk about that because the sun is shining again today. Actually, that was the day. We had snow, we had ice, we had rain, and I'm not sure if we had sun that day. I'm not sure it quit early enough. We had thunder, we had lightning, we had an Ontario spring weather event, which happens like weekly around here.
So we've talked about weather. We could talk about the political climate, but we're not going to. We're instead going to talk about communicable disease.
Which is one of those things that, as you say, that is actually very entertaining. However, the reality is it's one we've actually talked about before here on the Canadian Podcow, and because it is so new, so different, and could be fairly impactful for us in the Canadian dairy industry, talking about the H5N1 avian influenza that's circulating in North America for quite some time is something we want to talk about again today.
Yep, won't be not the first time, won't be the last time that we're talking about this, but we thought it's time for an update on the disease. We've got a great guest today. We'll try to get in a lot of questions and a lot of answers in this episode. So thank you for listening to the Canadian Podcow.
So today, Sarah, we're going to talk about the highly pathogenic avian influenza, H5N1, called HPAI for short. In the United States, I mean, we've talked about this, Sarah. The first cases in cows were detected in Texas last year, beginning of February 2024. It's been a year already. It's gone through a lot of different places through the U.S. And it's one of those things I really like having conversations like this to kind of get that update as to where we are.
Yeah, it's constantly evolving, so it's great to have some new information. And to answer all the questions, we're lucky to have an excellent resource person with us today. Our guest is a veterinarian and the National Manager of Ruminant and Swine Programs at the Animal Health Branch of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Dr. Geneviève Toupin. Dr. Toupin, welcome to the Canadian Podcow.
Hello, Andrew and Sarah. Thanks you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, it's our pleasure because, as I mentioned before, this is a subject we really like to talk about, just to give producers that most up-to-date information we can. But just in case people made the terrible mistake of not listening to past episodes that we've posted, maybe we can kind of start from the beginning. Avian influenza is not a new disease in agriculture, but first time for cows, isn't it?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So this is the first time in the world that avian influenza has been detected in dairy cows, well, a year ago. So the virus strain that has been circulating in wild birds in North America for 3 years now and has infected an impressive number of domestic birds has also been found in several wild mammals, a few isolated cases in dogs and cats, but this is the first time it has been found in cows.
And so far as I understand it, there are cases in the United States, but there's still none in Canada. So maybe you could tell us about what the government is doing to prepare in case it should come here.
Yeah, that's right, Sarah. There have been no cases detected in Canada, but we keep a close watch. Since the USDA announcement of the detection of HPAI in dairy cows in the US, the CFIA, so the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, has been working hard to develop a response plan in case of a detection in Canada. We have also put in place additional import requirements and surveillance, first on retail milk, and for the last few months on raw milk collected from the truck at the processing plant. So far, nearly 2,500 samples have been tested and all are negative. And the primary objective is to provide early detection of the disease to stop its progression as quickly as possible and to limit the impact on the animal, the human, and the financial health of dairy producers in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that as a Canadian dairy producer definitely makes me feel good that at least we've been able to hold it off for now. But the one piece of new information I think that is different since we've had this conversation before is another strain of H5N1. Correct me if I'm wrong. D1.1. Is kind of what I've heard. But the reality with it is whatever it's called, there's been rumors that it has been, it is different. It was found in Nevada. It was found a couple of months ago. Can you give me an idea, like how different do we know this strain is? Is it more dangerous? What do we know?
Yeah, so very good question. So the D1.1 viruses identified in dairy cattle in Nevada were found to be closely related to other D1.1 viruses recently detected in migratory wild birds across multiple North American flyways. So I have not seen anything to report. The clinical signs in dairy cattle differ considerably between the D1.1, which affected poultry and has been affecting poultry in Canada as well as the US, and that B3.13 strain that was initially found in those dairy cattle. So I think the main takeaway for human health is that every H5N1 has the potential to cause serious disease in people. And so using proper protection is key for any potential exposure.
So after we get all our PPE on, if we think we have an animal that might be having this disease, what would we be looking for in the herd? Like what kinds of signs as dairy farmers can we look for in our cattle and start to think to ourselves, I wonder. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
Of course. So the avian influenza virus is part of the large family of viruses that cause the flu. That's why in poultry, it's also called bird flu. And those of you who have caught the flu this winter know how bad it is. So in the cows, it's the same thing. It's a flu, so the first thing we notice is that the affected cows will stop eating and decrease rumination. They can have a fever and are often dehydrated. And these clinical signs are the first to appear and can be caused by many different diseases. But the most obvious sign is the sudden and significant drop in milk production. This strain of the virus loves the cells of the mammary gland and in affected cows is found in large quantity there. By adding dehydration to this, well, the appearance of the milk will be altered and have the consistency of colostrum that is thicker and yellowish. And some cows will also show more human signs of the flu with some respiratory signs, such as runny nose.
So then I'm curious, when you made that comparison to kind of us as people with the flu, I know the flu did go through our house. It hit 2 out of 4. We were a 50% contamination rate. I'm curious, in a situation like that, I can't imagine, the other 2 were obviously exposed to it, didn't show symptoms. Are cows kind of the same thing? Can we assume that this goes through the whole herd and everybody is impacted? If a cow gets it, will they have the same basically the same results no matter who they are? What happens when it does hit a herd?
Well, in fact, you nailed it. In fact, what we've learned from the information we have obtained from our certain neighbors so far is that it's about 10 to 20% of lactating cows in a herd who will present with severe clinical signs. So, as you said, the virus, just like in your home, will pass through the whole herd. But some cows will be sicker than others, kind of like a flu will spread in my own family at home. And usually the clinical signs will improve fairly quickly. So in about 4 to 7 days, most cows will return to milk production after recovering from the disease. But it's not yet clear, though, whether they will return to the same levels as before. So same level of milk production as before. We don't know yet.
So if we're looking at the herd and we think that we've got it, What then do we do? Who do we call? What would be best practices in terms of connecting with outside help?
So the first thing to do if you suspect avian influenza in your herd is to contact your veterinarian so that they come and they can assess the situation. As I explained earlier, the clinical signs may resemble several other diseases. So it's really the veterinarian who knows your herd that will be able to rule out the other possible causes of these general symptoms. And if the vet suspects avian influenza, then they must immediately contact the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and their provincial Ministry of Agriculture because it's a reportable disease.
Now, do you know from conversations you've had with your colleagues in the U.S. and just some of the information that you do come across, if an animal does come down with this, what are some of the things we can do to, care for them? What are some of the things that we know does work to try to at least get them through and out the other side with this?
Well, Andrew, as I said, and as you know, it's the flu, so it's similar to human. There are not really any effective drugs to kill viruses. So treatment for cold and flu in your family, it's to make people comfortable and help them get through it. It's the same with cows. So the herd veterinarian will aim to control the fever and the pain, give supportive treatments to dehydrate the animal. And after a few days, the clinical signs improve. The animal will heal itself and will start eating, drinking, and producing milk again.
So what is the testing procedure for cows showing clinical signs to actually confirm whether they do or don't have it?
Great question, Sarah. So to check if cows with clinical signs have avian influenza, a PCR test is used. And this test finds the virus by detecting its genetic material. And as I said earlier, it's a virus that loves the cells of the mammary glands, so it's found in very large quantity in milk, which makes it our best sample to detect the virus. If a producer suspects disease in their herd, they should contact their veterinarian for an evaluation. And if their veterinarian also suspects bird flu, they need to call their local CFIA district office where they can get instruction on how to take a milk sample from a sick animal. And then the veterinarian sends the sample to the local laboratory. And generally, it's a test which is quite fast to do. So in 24, 48 hours, usually the results are available. Of course, it depends on how much time it takes to be shipped to the lab, etc. But once it's in the lab, between a day or two, results should be available. It's also possible to do the same PCR test on nasal secretion, but as there is much less virus in the respiratory tract, there is less chance of finding it using this sample type.
Now, you mentioned, Dr. Toupin, that this is a notifiable disease. If that sample comes back, it is positive, your vet is going to notify the CFIA. Give me a process, because us in the dairy industry, we've heard rumors based on, or not even rumors, but we've heard through other diseases what some of the processes would look like. You've obviously gone through what this would look like if this does show up. What happens once you hear a farm has this H5N1?
So what needs to be really clear is that the reporting of a suspicion, which is under our Health of Animal Act, is critical to be able to get to that early detection stage to reduce the spread and the progression of the disease. So reporting a suspicion, and that's even before taking the sample and getting a positive result. So just the reporting of a suspicion of HPAI in livestock, that does not necessarily lead to immediate on-farm action. And generally, confirmation of a positive result is expected before disease control measures are implemented. And this reporting comes with many advantages, as it's the most effective way to achieve early detection and then reduce the virus spread to other herds.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about here, Dr. Toupin, but we need to take a short break for a message from our sponsors. Stay right here. We have a lot of other questions about HPAI and how it affects our farms in the future right after this.
As Canadian dairy farmers, we follow ProAction, Dairy Farmers of Canada's National Quality Assurance Program with 6 modules. Modules like milk quality. That stands for high standards of milk production. Or food safety, producing milk that meets 42 requirements. And animal care. That means caring for every cow. ProAction sets standards of excellence. That's what's behind the Blue Cow logo. Dairy Farmers of Canada.
And we're back at the Canadian Podcast with our guest, Geneviève Toupin, National Manager of Ruminant and Swine Programs at the Animal Health Directorate of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Dr. Toupin, how does the HPAI virus spread?
Oh dear, that's the $1,000,000 question.
Welcome back.
So, the influenza virus changes all the time through mutation. So the H5N1 strain has been found in migratory birds in North America for over 3 years now. In winter 2024, a wild bird brought this strain to a dairy herd in Texas. And the virus spreads between cows and herd in many ways. Studies in the US show that moving animals is the main way the disease spreads, even if the cows didn't look sick when they were moved. Contaminated milk from a sick cow remains the main source of virus, so any piece of equipment, including milking equipment, clothing, boots, hands, etc., that has come in contact with contaminated milk can spread the virus. The sharing of workers and equipment between dairy farms and poultry farms is a link that has also been proven. It's a cause of transmission of H5N1 B313, that strain affecting cows, to those poultry farms in the US. So there's still a lot going on trying to find it, but basically moving animals and sharing equipment and workers are the most 2 important ways of transmission right now that we learn from the US.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing that I start to think about when I think through this is, hearing from my friends and colleagues who are in the poultry industry, who have dealt with this for years and years, right? And I know for them, this time of year is a big one that they do worry more about, given that the migratory birds are kind of coming back north. So I have this sense of some of the precautions that they're taking. Maybe you could walk me through, particularly knowing that it is the time of year where if it's going to spread through migratory birds, it's going to do it now. What are some of the precautions I should be taking on my farm? Should I close the herd right down? What kinds of things should I be doing, Geneviève?
Yeah. So if you have a closed herd, which means no new cows come in and your cows don't leave and return, this lowers the risk of disease entering your farm, not only HPAI, but many diseases, but you still need to be careful. Even cows from trusted source can carry harmful viruses like HPAI without showing symptoms. So it's crucial to isolate any new or returning cows. Take care of isolate cows last. Clean your equipment before using it on other cows. Do the same for sick cows in hospital pen. And in Canada, you can test healthy cows for HPAI without reporting to the CFIA as a biosecurity precaution. And of course, avoid importing dairy cows from the US. But if you must, make sure they are tested before crossing the border. Those are my biggest recommendation, I would say. Best practices.
So you talked a bit about employees and people coming back and forth, but there's also visitors. I mean, on the farm, you get a lot of people just coming and going, salespeople, services, whatever. I guess we should also try to limit the number of those that are coming and going from the farm.
Indeed, Sarah, visitors have been shown to be a source of HPAI spread in the US, and limiting visitors' access to animals is another best practice to incorporate into an on-farm biosecurity plan. If visitors must have access to animal buildings, ensure that their equipment, clothing, and boots are clean and have not been used on other farms before visiting yours without having been cleaned and disinfected.
Well, and when you talk about those types of things, I think through, again, this kind of poultry barn mentality, I think, ones that I've been on, I take my boots off, I step over a wall, I disinfect, I do all of these types of things. Are those kind of prevention measures what we need to be doing now? Is that overkill for where we are at right now? Or kind of what's your recommendation for some of the other prevention measures we could be doing?
Yeah, totally. Those types of Danish entry that you will find in poultry barn and swine barn are methods that basically the principles are you want to leave out what you can drag to animals that could contaminate them. So with that D1.1 strain now affecting cattle down in the United States that is carried over by migratory birds, of course I would say if you can have dedicated piece of equipment that stays inside your barn and you change it when you go out, that's also one of the best practices that is part of many on-farm biosecurity plan. And producer can find detailed information on the CFIA's website because we do have national biosecurity guidelines that have been built with the help of industry that are available on our website.
The other one, though, that makes us a bit unique to poultry and swine farms is how open the barns are. Like if I think of, me and my feed mixer, I open a big door to drive in. And, I can't stop a bird from coming in. There are there's not a ton, but there's a few. How do I deal with that? Do you have any idea what some of the prevention measures could be for dealing with the reality that we actually could get some of those birds actually in a barn?
Yeah, that's a hard question because I do agree that the way the buildings are set is really different from one production type to another. I will obviously not be able to provide answers for every situation here, but if there's a way that you can keep your feed covered so that wild animals and wild birds don't have access to it, if you had water source on your farm and you can find a way to keep wild birds away from it, that's another way of protecting yourself and your animals. About birds coming in, that's hard. Although, some species of birds are less affected than others. Although this recent, introduction in cattle in the U.S. have shown that it's not only waterfowl that are affected by the virus and that can carry it. So we need to look at broader type of species of birds that can carry the virus. So I think it's time to be creative and try as much as possible to keep those birds out. And the more you're gonna prevent breaches in your biosecurity, the higher you will mitigate that risk of getting virus inside of your barn to your animals.
Yeah, it's really not about going to 0%. It's just about lowering it.
Yeah, the more you will lower it, the better.
So even if we don't have an infected cow on the farm, is the H5N1 virus present in Canada at the moment in birds or whatever? And then just to follow up your earlier question or comments about birds, I know quickly, we have a lot of avian influenza in the Fraser Valley where I live. First thing people think is, I have to keep birds out. But as far as it traveling in dairy cattle, it's more common cow to cow. Is that correct? We need to, if we're doing biosecurity on the farm, we need to first, to try to not have this on the farm, stop the cows coming back and forth, and then we could spend our energy on birds. Is this right?
So let's start with H5N1 first. So influenza A strain, H5N1, has been circulating around the world for several years now and has been present in domestic poultry in Canada since December 2021. It is circulating in those migratory birds for sure. And it's been more than 3 years that the poultry industry has been under attack from HPAI. So fortunately, Canada has not yet been affected by the strain that reaches cows. So that's a good thing. Now, like I said, the virus has a big preference for the mammary gland cell in cows. And it's really through milk that we see the highest level of transmission compared to respiratory droplets from birds. And it's really why this cow-to-cow transmission is possible. So basically moving a lactating cow to another place, and some non-lactating cow could be carrying the virus as well. So moving animals is really the most obvious way of transmission right now between cows. That being said, with this new D1.1 that has been found in those dairies down south, we need to add that level of, well, yeah, it might come from the environment as well, so we need to be cautious on that front too.
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here and admit something that despite being recommended I should do it, I don't, Geneviève. And that is when it comes to feeding milk to calves. It's one of those things that my vet even wants me to pasteurize the milk that I pull from robots and give it to calves. We haven't had an issue, so therefore I don't. I know it's not the right idea. I understand that. But I am curious, in an event like this, if all of a sudden we did run into an issue, shedding through the milk is obviously its biggest thing. I don't own a pasteurizer. Is there something like acidifying it that can help? Is there anything else I can do, or should I have listened to my vet?
You should always listen to your vet, Andrew.
She'll tell you that too.
I won't say anything other than listen to your vet. So there aren't many scientific studies on how to effectively kill the HPAI virus in milk. However, heating milk to pasteurization temperatures works. And acidifying milk might also kill the virus, but there's not enough evidence right now to confirm this. There's a working group of experts from CFIA, from Public Health Agency of Canada, and from Health Canada, the provinces and industry, that are discussing and trying to find practical solutions to inactivating the virus in waste milk in case HPAI in cattle is detected in Canada. So, I mean, as long as we don't have it and we can keep it out of the country, you're safe. But the minute it's here, I mean, even for cats, for barn cats, it has shown to raw milk given to barn cat has killed a number of them. So it can be really harmful to some species. That being said, what we know about calf, there's been one study which I'm not familiar enough with the details to speak about it, but I believe they tried to infect calf and they showed there was some sort of replication, but it will not kill them as it can kill a cat. They might get a little like flu symptoms, but not more than that so far. But that's just really like one study, and as I said, not a lot of information in the literature right now to be able to say anything other than try to heat up your milk above the temperature that pasteurization requires.
I get it. Listen to my vet. Okay.
Big pasteurizer fan over here, gotta say. But, so if there is contamination, Geneviève, is the pasteurized milk safe for consumption? I think something that farmers right away worry about is, okay, my cows are sick. What about the milk? Like, are they still going to pick it up? What happens? Can it still be used?
So there's absolutely no doubt that pasteurized milk is safe. Several studies on that front have been conducted in the US and Canada by the CFIA in collaboration with Health Canada, and the commercial pasteurization process is effective in inactivating the HPAI virus. So therefore, there is no risk to consumer. As for the milk pickup, that's a really good question. And because we know in Canada, the selling raw milk is illegal, it needs to be pasteurized. There's a process so that, and through proaction with Dairy Farmers of Canada, you know, as a producer, that if your cow looks sick, if the milk doesn't look healthy, even if you don't know why, what diseases is going on, you know this milk doesn't go in the buck tank. It needs to be diverted. So that's the first line of defense right there. And then, I mean, if some healthy looking cow with healthy looking milk shed a little bit of virus in it, the milk still is going to be picked up, but we're going to make sure that it goes through a processing plant that will go through full pasteurization. And then, as I said, plenty of studies, and pasteurization is safe. So that milk, once pasteurized, is absolutely safe to consume.
And I've heard that lots of times, but the one that that I want to kind of step in here on is that the fact that you're testing for traces of that virus in milk at the retail level, and we found traces in U.S. milk. What does that mean when people say we found traces? Because I think that gets consumers worried when we found traces of this virus in milk on store shelves. Not in Canada, but in the U.S.
Yes, totally. And I agree that frightens people. And there was a piece of information missing. So it's simply because the PCR test I was talking about earlier that we use, it does not distinguish between the genetic material of a live virus or a killed one. So after HPAI was detected in U.S. retail milk through PCR, the USDA laboratories conducted another test called virus isolation. And this test means trying to reproduce the virus in a culture medium. So if nothing grows, it means that the genetic material that was found was actually inactive or inactivated. And that confirms that pasteurization has been effective. So that's what happened in the US. Yes, they found genetic material, but then they were not able to grow the virus. So that literally confirmed that that milk that was pasteurized actually killed the virus.
So how about importing cows? I get a lot of questions in BC here specifically, for sure, where lots of people import lots of cows from the United States. And we know that the USDA requires an HPAI PCR negative test result be performed and not more than 7 days prior to them crossing the border. But what is the impact for us here in Canada, especially for farms that would rely pretty heavily on imports of cattle?
So I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. However, I will say this. In these difficult times where everything is always more expensive and where many people are struggling, I understand the fears of our Canadian producers. What I hope is that HPAI will never affect our Canadian livestock and that the US will manage to eliminate it before the virus crosses the border. But we cannot control everything. Migratory birds do not require permission before landing in our country. So the testing and surveillance that is required for movement between US states and then across the Canadian border is an excellent way to limit the spread of the virus or its entry into Canada. Obviously, this can generate additional costs. However, one must ask, what is worse? Pay a little more to stock up on healthy replacement animals or introduce the virus on its farm and have to pay for the care of 20% of its herd? So this may represent a significant amount of money if we rely on some testimonies from American veterinarians right now.
Well, it's one of those things I would share your hope, Geneviève, in that we don't end up with that HPAI here on farm in Canada. But I am curious, kind of, between that hope, but recognizing that, gosh, it is like we are close to Michigan here. And you're right, the birds have not followed proper border control measures. And so it's one of those cases that I really wonder as a producer, what can I expect going forward? Is this one where I should really lock things down and expect that it is a real possibility? Or is it just expect that, folks like you, folks at DFC, all of these are doing the best they can with the information they can. And if it does ever come, then we deal with it. What can I expect?
So we continue to work closely with the provinces and industry to refine our pan-Canadian surveillance plan. So that's one thing. Producers and their veterinarians are expected to report a suspicion. And as I said, this only requires a test to begin with. If it turns out positive, yes, there would be restriction on the movement of animals, but some movement will be possible, especially the normal milk, like I said. It can be picked up and sent to the processing plant. So your animals will heal if it comes through and goes through your herd. They do not have to be eliminated. That's not what we're going to do. We're just going to restrict the movement of these live animal. And some movement might be possible as well. I'm just thinking about some calves sometimes. So it's just finding the best approach to mitigate as much as possible the transmission and the spread while trying to not affect too much of the producer business, because it's finding that right balance between both of them. So what I can say is let's just all keep our eyes open, stay vigilant and cautious.
Well, we do appreciate that balance and all the effort you're putting into trying to help find it too, because it's not easy. So thank you, Dr. Toupin. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast and for answering all our questions.
My pleasure.
And that's all for this episode of the Canadian Podcast. Thanks to our sponsor, Dairy Farmers of Canada, and our production team, Carl Belanger and Bruce Sargent.
Thanks also to our guest, Dr. Geneviève Toupin, and certainly to you for listening to us. If you have any comments or you want to come see us on social networks such as Facebook, X, or Blue Sky, please do so. We'd love to hear from you. And I did sign up for a Blue Sky account now, so I legitimately saw someone there who was saying some nice things about us. It was great.
Well, I'm going to join that conversation too, and I can't wait to have you again at the next episode of the Canadian Podcast.